Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into a topic that covers over 70% of our planet's surface, water. We see it everywhere, in oceans, rivers, and rain. But have you ever stopped to wonder just how much water is actually on Earth? The numbers are so mind-bogglingly huge they almost seem made up. So let's try to wrap our heads around it. Scientists estimate that our planet holds a staggering 1.386 billion cubic kilometers of water. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What on earth does a cubic kilometer even look like? Imagine a giant cube, 1 kilometer tall, 1 kilometer wide, and 1 kilometer long. Now imagine nearly 1.4 billion of those giant cubes filled with water. That's the total volume we're talking about. If we were to pour all that water into liters, the number would be 1.386 followed by 21 zeros. That's 1.386 sextillion liters. It's a number so large that it's almost impossible to visualize. To put it another way, it's about 366 quintillion gallons. Our brains just aren't built to comprehend scales this massive. But what's even more fascinating than the total amount is where all this water is located. You might assume it's all just sloshing around in the oceans, but the story is far more complex and surprising. So let's start our global water tour with the most obvious location, the oceans and seas. This is where the vast majority of Earth's water resides. The oceans hold about 1.338 billion cubic kilometers of salt water. That accounts for a whopping 96.5% of all the water on our planet. This massive volume is what drives our climate, shapes our coastlines, and supports an incredible diversity of life. But here's the catch: it's salt water. While it's essential for the planet's systems, we can't drink it or use it for agriculture without expensive and energy-intensive desalination processes. So, while we have an abundance of water, most of it isn't directly usable for our daily needs. This is a crucial point that we'll keep coming back to. Now, if 96.5% of the water is salt water in the oceans, what about the remaining 3.5%? This is where things get really interesting. This small fraction is all the fresh water on Earth, but it's not all liquid and it's certainly not all in one place. Let's look at the second largest water reservoir on the planet: glaciers and ice caps. Believe it or not, frozen water locked up in places like Antarctica, Greenland, and mountain glaciers makes up about 1.74% of Earth's total water. That might not sound like much, but it's actually about 24 million cubic kilometers. This means that nearly 70% of all the fresh water on Earth is frozen solid. This frozen reservoir acts like a global savings account for fresh water. As glaciers melt, they release water into rivers, which provides a vital source of drinking water and irrigation for billions of people downstream. However, with our climate changing, these frozen reservoirs are melting at an alarming rate, which has serious consequences for sea level rise and water security. So, we have the oceans, and we have the ice. What's next on our list? We have to go underground. The third largest store of water on Earth is groundwater. This is the water that soaks into the ground and is held in the soil and in the cracks and spaces within rocks. There's an estimated 23.4 million cubic kilometers of groundwater, which is about 1.7% of the planet's total water. That's almost as much water as there is in all the glaciers and ice caps combined. But again, there's a catch. Much of this groundwater is what we call saline, meaning it's salty, often because it's been in contact with mineral-rich rock formations for thousands of years. A significant portion is also located very deep underground, making it incredibly difficult and expensive to access. The freshwater portion of groundwater, which is closer to the surface, is a critical resource that we tap into with wells for drinking and farming. But we're using it up much faster than it can be naturally replenished, which is a huge sustainability challenge for many regions around the world. So far, we've covered over 99% of Earth's water, and we haven't even mentioned the places we think of most often when we picture freshwater: lakes and rivers. This is where the numbers start to get surprisingly small. All the freshwater lakes in the world, from the Great Lakes in North America to Lake Baikal in Siberia, collectively hold about 91,000 cubic kilometers of water. That sounds like a lot, but it's only 0.007% of Earth's total water. It's a tiny sliver. And what about rivers? The mighty Amazon, the Nile, the Yangtze, All the rivers in the world combined contain only about 2,120 cubic kilometers of water at any given moment. That's a minuscule 0.002% of the world's total water. Isn't that incredible? Rivers are so vital to our civilizations. They're the arteries of our continents, and yet they represent such a tiny fraction of the global water supply. This highlights just how dynamic the water cycle is. The water in a river is constantly flowing, moving from the land to the sea, evaporating, and falling again as rain. So while the volume at any one time is small, the flow-through is enormous. But we're not done yet. There's water in places you might not even think about. Take the atmosphere, for instance. The air around us is holding water in the form of vapor, clouds, and humidity. At any given moment, the atmosphere contains about 12,900 cubic kilometers of water. That's more than 6 times the amount of water in all the rivers combined. This atmospheric water is what creates our weather, transporting moisture around the globe and delivering rain and snow that replenish our lakes, rivers, and groundwater. It's a critical, fast-moving part of the water cycle. And finally, let's talk about the water inside us and all other living things. Every plant, every animal, every human is made up largely of water. This is called biological water. If you were to gather up all the water contained within every living organism on the planet, you'd have about 1,120 cubic kilometers. That's about half the amount of water in all the world's rivers. It is a tiny percentage, just 0.0001% of the total, but it is the water that makes life itself possible. So let's put it all together. We started with this incomprehensibly large number, 1.386 billion cubic kilometers of water. We found that 96.5% of it is salt water in the oceans. The remaining 3.5% is freshwater. But of that freshwater, about 69% is locked up as ice. Another 30% is hidden away as groundwater. That leaves just about 1% of the world's freshwater readily available on the surface. So, when you break it all down, the easily accessible freshwater in lakes and rivers, the water we rely on most for our daily lives, makes up only about 0.007% of all the water on Earth. Let me repeat that. 0.007%. It's a sobering thought, isn't it? Our planet is awash with water, yet the portion that is fresh, liquid, and easily accessible is incredibly rare and precious. This perspective completely changes how we should think about water. It's not an infinite resource, it's a finite, and in many places a fragile resource that requires careful management and conservation. Every drop we use for drinking, for growing our food, for manufacturing goods, comes from this tiny, precious fraction. Understanding this distribution is the first step toward appreciating the true value of water. It shows us why protecting our rivers and lakes from pollution is so important, why managing our groundwater sustainably is critical, and why the health of our planet's ice caps has a direct impact on our future. So the next time you turn on the tap, take a moment to think about the incredible journey that water has taken to get to you. It's a tiny part of a vast, interconnected global system, and it's one of the most precious resources we have. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into Earth's water. If you found this fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into our amazing world. Let me know in the comments what surprised you the most about these numbers. See you in the next video.